Perfect. We will get started. Sorry. Okay, so Ken and I are going to discuss the big American English is a dialect of British English. Sorry, I have cat hair on me, which is normal. I completely disagree with that statement because as an American, we still speak English. You really can't deny that. Our language, the official language in the United States is English. Now, the difference is between American and British English, and hey, let's include Australia too, is we may pronounce things differently. For example, vitamin. I say vitamin, actually. Let's not use my teacher mode accent today. Vitamin. And in British English, Ken, do you know the pronunciation? Otherwise, I can try.
Vitamin.
Thank you. It's vitamin. They really raise that second part. Vitamin. So in American English, I'm actually saying the T as a D, and I'm also emphasizing the first part of the word, whereas in British English, they emphasize the middle of the word. So it's those kinds of differences. And so for me, it's not a dialect. A dialect is a language, in my opinion, it's a language that comes from another language. And I don't really have super great examples for that. I mean, I know in English, for example, we have French influence in many different ways. We have a lot of German influence. And I don't know, words from different languages. In American English, we use the word zucchini, whereas the British use the French word courgette or something like that. It's a green vegetable. I don't know how to, I can't translate this into Spanish today, so it's a little bit more challenging. So Ken, I mean, these are just my basic initial thoughts. Tell me what you think. What's going on in your head?
Actually, Japanese has a lot of dialects, actually.
Okay, so perfect. What's a dialect for you?
So I get the dialect in such sense. In the, how can I say, Britain and Japan is a small country. However, there are a lot of different languages up to local area. Even though my local area, there are several dialects. So it came from maybe Japanese usually. So, but how the standard Japanese was, how was the standard Japanese made? Because of the radio broadcasting, it's based on the Tokyo's uptown's dialect, and then it became a standard dialect here. So its kind of power is or such kind of maybe political or social power decides what is the main kind of standard language is. And talking about Britain, I learned a bit about that on BBC, kind of that linguistic show. And actually, British standard uh, dialect accent is called received pronunciation, which means BBC's broadcaster speaking, newscaster speaking. However, the speaker of that RP in Britain is just 3%. So also nowadays, even the newscaster began to talk in their local dialect, local accent. So how can I say, I have such idea in terms of dialect and accent. So there's no standard actually because, but
Thanks. We're never going to solve this.
Or something, decide, oh, this is that standard. And American standard, maybe accent or dialect is called network standard, but I'm not sure what is a network standard. So,
well, let me go to your. Can I interrupt, or would you like to continue?
Okay. So maybe the media, because of the media. In the American case, maybe media decides, but I don't think the standardization of language is so strong like in Japan and America, in my impression.
Okay. So I like your whole idea of the broadcast, the news, who's on the news. Because in the United States, I don't know if it's true or not. My mom told me this years ago that the broadcasters, the people on the news, actually come from my area, the Midwest,
Right.
because they say that we have the most clear accent, most neutral. I'm sorry, neutral is the word. Now, as I've lived in Spain, I actually have noticed that I don't have a very neutral accent because I emphasize my O's and my A's very strongly. Again, in the American accent in general, I don't pronounce the T's normally. I do here in class because I think it's more neutral, even more, so everyone can understand me a little bit easier. Because I have people tell me that my accent is super easy and other people who tell me it's impossible. So it really depends on the person because my accent doesn't change on a regular basis. And so for me, with you relating the BBC and the English accent to them, that's, I guess, if you want to call it, we do it the same in the United States as far as that. And that's where my accent comes in. The Midwest, Wisconsin, Illinois,
Yeah, I
Minnesota,
follow.
Michigan, probably, in that. So that's fine. I mean, even between the states, we use different words for things. In Texas, they use the word y'all. I'm just going to type that, y'all, which means you all, which is basically you plural in a different way, as I would just say you, and I don't need to say you all. Also, in Wisconsin, we have something called a bubbler. Okay, a bubbler is very Wisconsin. It is actually known as a fountain,
Mhm.
water fountain. Um,
Right.
It's where you drink water. Like you put your mouth there and the
Ah,
water comes out and you
yes.
drink it. In Wisconsin, only, basically, as far as I'm concerned, we call it a bubbler. No one else knows what a bubbler is in the United
Right.
States.
I see.
So is that a regional thing? Is it a dialect? Because it's not an accent. An accent is the sounds
Yes.
that are produced when you speak. And the accent is easy. I have a Midwest accent. I have an American accent. Um, so to me, accent is easy. It's the dialect part that I don't like because I think, like I said, it's offensive to me personally. I don't know about any other Americans. That say, well, no, American English is a dialect of British English. And I don't think it's so. I mean, it's
Mhm.
different. Let's be honest. Okay. When someone speaks British English or someone speaks American English, we say things differently. They'll say, oh, phone me. And I'll say, call me.
Mhm.
Well, we both understand the words. I mean, that's not that difficult to communicate. But as far as um words and things like that, I suppose it'd be different. Again, we mentioned the pronunciation, but I don't think American English is so different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
um
and
that
as you said, talking about dialect, the word and the expression itself changes up to the area, but accent, just sound or intonation changes. That's my understanding of difference between
yeah,
dialect and accent. Yes.
exactly. And it's all regional. I mean, I think both
Right.
depend on where you are in the world. I think about.
Also, in
Mhm.
British case, class, social class, especially in the past, different social class people
Yeah.
talk differently. So kind of complicated in terms of the social aspect for this.
It is. I mean, I know back in the day, and even on Facebook, I have some friends from England, and one person said the other day, "Me dog's terrified" or something.
Mhm.
Me dog's terrified, for example, or scared or something. Basically, what they wanted to say is, "My dog is terrified." Okay,
Yeah.
so that's not even correct. So that is a lower level as far as social class. That's an example. They use me instead of my or something like that. That I learned a long time ago. I've also heard that the Queen's English is the most correct English.
So the go ahead,
No, I
sorry.
mean, my question there is what happens when there's a different queen?
Yes. So through my learning, I learned, the purpose of traditional grammar method. In 19th centuries, maybe 18th
Mhm.
century. So to teach upper class English to lower class people. That's why it's all language is alive. That always in the traditional kind of grammar said it's wrong, even though
Mhm.
it's widely used. Typical case, nowadays, like often and often. People say often a lot nowadays, so it's
Mhm.
become standard. But some people ask it's not standard, but actually, in my opinion, if the many people began to use that language, the word or accent, I think it's a standard
I
in
agree with
common
that. I like
mind.
that. Well, I mean, one example in the last couple years could be the word selfie. The word selfie never existed before.
Yes, that's right.
Or Twitter, to Twitter. I mean, in Spanish, there's a verb to Twitter is tuitear or tuitear. I can't pronounce it very well. I don't Twitter, so it doesn't matter. But um, they're inventing these words, and so of course, I don't know if you know Rachel Ray in the United States. She's a famous chef, cook, whatever.
Mhm.
She invented EEVV extra. No, wait, no, I did that wrong. EVOO. Sorry, I didn't think about it. Extra virgin olive oil. It became a word. It is
Right.
now in the dictionary. Why? Because she would say it so often on TV. To do her shows, her cooking shows. She's like, oh, a little bit of EVOO, and welcome to the flies. The flies are everywhere too. um, and so it became a word because it became used, like you said, and so that I like. So I like how you said like language is alive, even though it's not a living being. It's still alive because it changes,
Yes.
and I find that pretty interesting.
So my uh, my aspect of grammar, I don't deny grammar. It's useful, but sometimes traditional grammar method cannot follow such actual change of language. So it's kind a little bit time lag. So maybe so actually such phenomenon happens in Japanese too, because a lot of new words come. Uh, People invented that. Also, English is very influential. So a lot of English words nowadays people began to use in Japanese. So maybe every time that kind of dictionary kind of when the dictionary was devised, sorry, new word is added.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So can you give me an example? I mean, do you pronounce it kind of more like you would Japanese? Because here in Spanish, I'm sorry, here in Spain, they do the same thing with Spanish words. For example, they say parking, the parking lot. They don't say aparcamiento anymore, which is their word. They say
right.
parking. And they
Okay.
use it, as you can see, my R is pronounced differently in Spanish. Parking. They do it
Mhm.
very different. So it's the same word. Or they use feeling, as the real word feeling. Um, they use look as your appearance. Oh, I like your look. They'll say. So they use the English, like literally use the English words. And that's a bit frustrating sometimes because I have to learn how to pronounce my words differently in order to sound okay in Spanish. Parking was really difficult for me. Shopping as well. They use so that's
Yes.
my question. Do you like Japanese the word?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Because Japanese doesn't pronounce R sound. R. This sound is very difficult to make for Japanese. So parking lot. Also, uh, Japanese has a lot of syllables. Every sound, usually, separated with a vowel. So parking lot changed to this parking lot, parking lot. you know, in the in the very end, the vowel appears.
Mm-hmm.
That's the character of Japanese English.
Interesting. Do you have any other examples?
A lot actually. Also, handle, which means handle,
Well, that's
handle.
a strange word to
It
use. I
says
mean, it's not that international. Yeah.
meaning different. If the Japanese say handle, that means a steering wheels of the
Oh,
car.
but I'm
Yes.
sure you had your own word before. I mean, why did you have to steal our word?
No such word in Japanese before.
How? What?
No, I don't think so. Handle, no, because car was invented 100 years ago or something. So maybe
Well, that,
handle,
that's my next question. I mean,
maybe, maybe it's a doorknob or something. Also, it can be called handle. In that case, we have a word, but I forgot. It's
even
almost like that.
you forgot. Also,
People say
handle is when you have
handle.
a
Yeah.
mug with a handle. That too, like a coffee mug.
Oh,
Those have a handle as well.
maybe I don't know. I forgot about that in Japanese. Maybe people say handle a lot nowadays, or
Interesting.
maybe nigiriguchi. Maybe it's not a one word. If I say that it's in
Yeah, it doesn't
Japanese.
sound like one word. It sounds a little bit longer than that. Um, but I mean, these, what is this? This is not I mean, that to me would be more of like a dialect. Do you know what I mean? But you're integrating words into a new language. And even for example, like I said with zucchini and courgette before, um, we don't have a real word in English. We just don't. And
Right.
and is that because of the food trade and like all over the world? And so maybe we didn't have that food and then it was brought in and we just used the word that we liked. But then why do we use different words in England, in the UK versus the United States? That doesn't make sense.
Right. Also, kind of language is how can I say is related to our identity.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of political or social thing. Actually, now
Mhm.
America was intended and it's an independent country. It so it's created. In 1920s, America, be, how can I say, in old time America, and so for example, 1920s, you know, American government intentionally beef up the English education in the school because they thought first generation cannot be American, but second and third generation can be American. So they focus on the English only education in the school. In, because it intentionally happened because I learned from that from the American professor teaching American pop culture.
Interesting.
She said about that in her lecture. So, but in the 1960s, different movement happens. You know, our society or American society has much diverse. So, kind of Spanish education or such kind of thing, was released in America because actually language, it's related to the standardization of language, so it creates our identity. But that's why maybe some people say such things because maybe, in my point of view, it seems like a power kind of power game, you know,
I
which
suppose, but also,
side
I mean,
goes side
we have,
is
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, just to kind of help defend that is we've integrated Spanish words into our language as well. Guacamole,
Mhm.
for example, tortilla shells, um, those kinds of things. So again, it came from them. So sorry, we're using those words. We don't have tortilla. I mean, we have taco shells, but those are the hard ones. And then we have tortillas, which are like the flour or corn, which are soft. So we have hard and soft shells, I suppose, is the Americanized version of those. But we still use tortilla. However, tortilla here in Spain is a Spanish omelet. Spanish
Uh,
tortilla with eggs and potatoes, maybe with onion, parsley if you want. So that's tortilla here. And so when we want to say tortilla, like the taco shells and fajita, they say tortita.
Right.
So they've cut off the end of the word of the iya sound, tortita. But also tortita americana would be like a pancake.
Right, right.
So that's even different. But then we have crepe, which is they use it in the Spanish language and in American, or I'm sorry, in English. But it's a French word. So, I mean, I mean, it's just we're integrating all of our languages together. I mean, except for I shouldn't say the most popular, but I mean, I definitely don't have any Russian words in my vocabulary, or you know what I mean, or any Dutch or German words, definitely, as I mentioned before. But I mean, we're all using each other's languages. I mean, a lot of people know konnichiwa and things, the very like the greetings and hello and thank you in a lot of different languages, just because we learn those. I don't know why. So, yeah, go ahead.
Even in the past, people are, kind of interaction of people happening, and nowadays it's more interaction.
Yeah,
Also, nowadays English became a global language. It's very influential
yeah.
to other languages. So we imported a lot of English language, also based on misunderstanding, like that, like handle case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sometimes annoying because I need to memorize the different meaning in Japanese I'm speaking Japanese and when I'm speaking English. I
Mm-hmm.
often also Japanese word Fujiyama, which means Mount Fuji, but
Okay.
Japanese doesn't say Fujiyama. We say Fuji-san. It's not the correct Japanese, but maybe based on the misunderstanding, maybe that misunderstood Japanese was spread to the world. So it often happens actually in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so before, I mean, we've kind of moved from dialect and accent to integration of languages.
mhm,
Um, which is really, it's like you said, it's global, it's interesting. I did want to say one thing about that is that here in Spain right now, basically they're trying to become a bilingual country, I think. A lot of
mhm,
people in the bigger cities, Barcelona, Madrid, for example,
mhm,
I mean, I work with a lot of people in both cities, and they have a really good level,
mhm,
like really high level of sure, there's mistakes and stuff like that. But anyway, in general, good conversation. When you come to the smaller cities, you're not there yet. And so it will take generations. And I think the children who are in school now in the elementary schools, once they get to become teachers and things like that, that's when it's really going to change here. Um, and so why are they becoming bilingual? Because there's so many foreigners that come to Spain for holidays and vacations that you kind of need. I mean, the police, doctors, nurses, I mean, people at the shops,
mhm,
basic needs of, depending on where you are, obviously at a shop, you don't need to know broken leg, but you need to know numbers. Um, and the names of the products and things like that. And so it really does depend how you're using. I'm sorry, it depends where you are in order to use which English, or which vocabulary in English. Um, but it's super important, and so I mean, everyone now that gets a degree has to have an intermediate level of English. It's a B1 here in Europe, and um I think that's okay. But at the same time, if you don't, the thing is that they force you to get that if you're good at a language or not. And I know, for example, my older brother was not good at languages, and he really struggled with Spanish, and so he stopped studying.
mhm.
So what happens to people like him? Do you know what I mean? Or those people that just can't
Yeah,
understand the concept um, of languages?
yeah,
But you're still forcing them to do that so they can communicate. So I don't necessarily agree with them having to
yeah,
get the degree. I think they
yeah.
should to benefit themselves in the future, but
Mhm.
there's exceptions to everything.
Nice. Uh, it's same as if you want to write academic thesis to the world. you need to master English, academic
Yeah.
English. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a reality.
Yeah. That's the other thing.
Unfair,
I don't even
actually,
have a C2
I
level.
feel, oh, it's unfair. Unfairness of the world. I like English and I love learning English, but even though people don't like it or it's not suitable for mastering new languages,
Yeah.
they have to sometimes, well, they are forced to do that. Yes.
And that's not fair. I mean, I think of my parents, if they were forced to learn Spanish, which is the second most common language in the United States and supposedly going to be an official language one day, um, they would have a hard time. My dad never learned a second language. My mom studied French. Um, and that's my other comment is that now here in Spain, I work with a girl who's 7 years old. And she, from 3 or 4 years old, was in Spanish class. I'm sorry, in English classes, doing songs, numbers, the basic things as children. Now, the last 2 years, she's really been given a lot of vocabulary. The funny, well, interesting part is that it's like really difficult vocabulary, so much so that she doesn't even know it in Spanish. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. How is this even possible? I think what they're trying to do is allow this kid to learn what it is in English and at the same time as Spanish. They now have to learn what it is. And it was like adjectives like smooth and rough and hard and flexible, unflexible, opaque, transparent, solid. Then they're learning about gases and liquids. And so they're learning a lot of these words, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. She's like 7. She doesn't need to know this yet. But then you think about it, at one point in our lives, we do have to learn it. And so I think they're pushing these topics so that they can learn them both at the same time. And then you really kind of can become bilingual at that point because you understand the words in both languages. So I guess it's a good way to do it, but at the same time, now next year they're putting in French. Now the children will have to learn French again. She'll be 8 in September when school starts. Can you imagine your 8-year-old
Right.
child learning 2 languages?
If they want, it's okay. But in my case, Japanese English education starts in middle school. But before that, I was really interested in English, so I studied English, you know, by myself.
The
But
same thing happened to me with
uh,
Spanish.
I really I thought I wanted to help somebody, to study English because maybe if being a bilingual, maybe the age of 12 is a kind of a separate point. After that, maybe brain changes. So after the linguistic period was over, you know, the master language is processed in a bit different part of the brain, which we process our native language. So, but bilingual brain process exactly the same brain point they use to both about to both languages. So, also English sound is pretty difficult for Japanese. I wanted to help your native speakers help, but I couldn't at that time. So, but I like it. I want it. It's okay. But if the kids don't want to, it's Also being bilingual, in my opinion, is not so easy. The kids have to be exposed and speak 2 languages every day. Not just 2 or 3 hours in a week.
Yeah,
Not like that, actually.
that's the other thing. I mean, there's schools in the United States that do one day in English, one day in Spanish. And I think
Mm.
that's a good way to do it. I think they do the same activities as well in both languages. So that they can see how they're both how it what it is like in both languages. And now I like that aspect. I mean, like you said, I took Spanish classes before we actually started learning in school, just because I was interested. And um for an hour or two, like 2 hours a week, isn't enough. I mean, you can't become bilingual. You can't really learn. And people always say, well, I want to become really fluent in English. How do I do it? It has to be part of your everyday life. You know, it's
Exactly.
not a subject like science where you can learn this information, or math where you can learn how to do an equation or something. A
Right.
language is not like that. A language is something that you learn every day. I will continue to learn Spanish until the day I die. I promise you. I will never become, I'm technically not bilingual. And that's a whole nother case of being bilingual or what kind of bilingual you are.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm just it's my second language. That's all I can say. I'm not bilingual because I still can't fully express myself to the extent that I want to in Spanish. I get the idea across. I mean, that's fine, but I'll never be bilingual. I didn't start learning Spanish early enough.
Mm, yes.
So,
So maybe people don't actually learn another language tend to think, you know, the master another language so easily. I found a book, often find a book which is titled to master English 1 week or 1 month. I always think it's a lie. It's just a catchphrase. It's
anything
impossible.
quick for learning a language is
Yeah.
not true. I will tell you that. I've not done anything, um, but it's really the effort that you put into it. If you put 110% effort into something, you will get 110% back from it. If you just think you're gonna, just because you do a course, you know, a lot of people come here and they come to an academy and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this course for this level, and I'll be perfect. But they don't understand is they have to put in outside effort. It's not just the 3 hours per day that we do for the intensive course for 3 months. It's, or you know, 2.5 months or whatever. It's intense in class and intense in the afternoons. Like, sorry people, you have to study in the afternoons. Like, you can't just go to let's say 60 hours, I don't even know, or more of English classes and think that you're going to understand English perfectly and be ready for the exam. Absolutely not. You have to do a
Right.
lot of outside work, you know, writing and speaking, and the more exposure you have to the language, the easier it will be in general, just because you'll be able to talk about different topics. I remember when my husband got his license, because here where we live, I don't need my license. I can't drive here in Spain anyway right now. Um, and we were in the car and I didn't know any of the words. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything because I didn't know the vocabulary. I still don't know how to say defrost, you know? And there's a lot of words that I don't know. I know like steering wheel, brakes, windshield wipers, and
Mm,
that's kind of about it, you know? The air conditioner, heat, which is the same in the house. So that wasn't any different. Um, Gears, I mean, to shift gears, I know, I guess. I mean, I've learned these over the years now, and it's so difficult if you've never spoken about a topic. Even the people like I talked to in Madrid, for example, have super high levels. We can talk about and deep conversations. The other day, I spoke to one about food, and he had no idea what to say, and I'm like, "This is sad. You know, you're such a high level, but you can't communicate about food." So, um, sorry, well, like I said, we've kind of gone off topic, but it definitely is relatable to um,
yeah.
the whole idea. So I'd kind of like to get back to that because I do have something I want to show everyone. So I'm just going to share the screen very quickly. Hopefully this works. My computer has been extremely slow lately. Um, this is the one I want. Okay, so dialect and accent. Okay, so the definitions are here below. So a dialect is a specific form of a language which is particular to a specific region or social group. So Ken, you mentioned this before. We talked about the region as well, kind of together. So it's a specific form of a language. So it's a little different than the language. And that's what I understood as a dialect. It's not exactly the same. It's different, especially depending on the region. So that's my other question too, as far as Spanish goes, because Spanish is spoken here in Spain, which is where it came from, and then anywhere, almost everywhere from Mexico south, you know, in America, and except for except for Brazil, which they speak Portuguese. So, I mean, technically, in their mind, I'm sure the Spanish is just like people say, oh, the British English accent is most pure. Well, okay, sure, that's fine because it came from there. So that's kind of the same idea with Spanish as it came from Spain. But what happens? Latino Spanish is there's a lot more people that speak Latino Spanish than Spain Spanish. Just like in the States, there are more people speaking American English than British English in the world. So, I mean, there's not really one correct. Let's say that, okay? But my question is this Latino Spanish a dialect of Spanish?
I think I think accent difference or Latino English, you know.
They do use different words though, and there's a lot of different words.
Okay, let me think. You know, I've read the paper about globalish. So nowadays, non-native speakers English, the number of non-native English speaker probably more than native English speakers. So such non-native English speaker is creating English actually. It's called globalish. I think that their English is one of the globalish, I guess.
Okay. Well, then I can understand. And I guess Spanish, I mean, technically, with this definition, I think that Latino Spanish is different because of I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to me that Spanish versus Spain Spanish versus Latino Spanish, there's more of a difference between the accents, and that goes by country, which is normal, but there's a lot more different words. And maybe that's true or not. I really don't know. And I'm comparing this to British English and American English. I know we use a lot of different words, but I know in Spanish they also use kind of a lot more different words. So I don't know. Okay. So technically, I would say, in my opinion, that's a dialect, but that also would kind of reference American English as a dialect too. Because I think the accent, I know. So the accent here is the distinct way of pronouncing a language, especially when from a specific area or social class. Okay, yes, the accent is your pronunciation. Perfect, done. That's easy. It's this dialect that I'm not really sure about. And then on top of it, and I mean, an accent is literally part of a dialect. So you're kind of mixing the two, but they're different. Now, what I've also found is some examples here. The pronunciation of the A in England, for example. Okay, or I should say the UK. Let's do that, the UK, because it does mention Scotland and Wales and stuff. So we have something called the Bath vowel, which the A is pronounced differently in the north and the south. Well, that also happens in British versus American English. The northern pronunciation would be cat, bath. That's like me, okay? In the South, they would say the A as if it were in the word father. Bath. It's that very dry A sound. Okay? So this is pronunciation. To me, that's accent, right?
Yes. I think so, yes. Yeah, in my impression of dialect is the expression itself different. But in this case, same words, just the sounds different.
Exactly. So when we said about vitamin and vitamin before, that's just pronunciation. That's accent. And for example, either and either, that depends. Either versus, well, no, it's the same word. Either, either. I say either. It's more comfortable for me. That's what I say. Other people in the United States as well as in England are going to say either. So there's really, I mean, that's okay. Both of these are okay. That's not a problem. But again, that's pronunciation. That's accent. The difference is how, like a percentage. I need a percentage of how different a language has to be from another one in order for it to become a dialect. That's what I'm really looking for. And then if I go down here, there's another difference is the R in England. In some parts of England, we've spoken about this before. In some parts of England, the R is pronounced and others with an S. Sorry, it isn't. For example, car and butter. There's a car, and I can't do this. Ken, can you please help me?
Maybe car, butter.
There you go. Exactly. Car, butter. Okay, car and butter. That's accent.
Sorry. I think it's accent because it's related to the sound, not a word.
Exactly.
Same word, just the sounds difference. So
No, I completely agree. So, the conclusion from the internet, this is a little example. An accent becomes a dialect when the language uses different vocabulary words. This is our key. The pronunciation is the accent. So it's the words that make it a dialect. Like I said, how much of this actually has to be different? How many words have to be different in order for it to become a dialect?
I don't know the clear criteria. I think there's no such a clear criteria how many words or things. I'm not sure about that, but no criteria.
Well, let me see. I'm looking this up.
There it is.
There's technical. So there's a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. This isn't really helping me. I mean, this is quite a long. As English terms want to try to intelligibility. Sorry, I'm trying to read here. There's no straight answer. That's the thing. Is a dialect considered a language? Two languages where speakers understand each other. Okay. Well, this is fine. Basically, if you speak a dialect of a language, it's considered the same language. Okay, so like when I said phone me versus call me, we understand that. That's a dialect, is what it's saying. And then it says, for example, to speak different languages, you don't understand what they're trying to say. And that's fine. That's a little bit easier. So here's the question. It says, is American English a dialect or a language? The answers below seem to say that both British and American English are sub-dialects of the English super language. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Both British and American English are sub-dialects of a single English super language.
Yeah, dialect from the one language. Yes.
You know what? I'm okay if they say that British and American English is a dialect.
So maybe if the dialect means dialect from the one language, I think so because English and German are also all language dialect from another language actually.
Exactly.
Germany, German and English separated 2,000 years ago. And Japanese origin is still a mystery. There's no academic consensus about that.
Really?
But this kind of barrier is very strong. It sounds like a bit, in my opinion, it's influenced by the South Pacific Ocean's language, probably because Korean share a lot of similar sound words, but Korean has 10 vowels. Japan has just only 5 vowels. In terms of pronunciation, in my opinion, maybe Japanese are a bit similar to Southern Pacific Ocean's language, like probably Hawaiian or such or probably Tagalog Philippine language or something like that. So all language dialect from another language actually. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, as far as your German reference, as far as I know, near Germany and Germany itself, obviously, there are 9 countries that German is the official language. And I've heard, what are the 2 countries? There's Dutch. Dutch is spoken in the Netherlands, but it's called flamenco in Belgium, and technically it's the same language. But that to me would be a dialect. They're called different things, even though supposedly they're the same language. But I'm sure there's different words because, what was I going to say? There's something, I can't think. Is it something with Portuguese? I don't remember right now. But I mean, Portuguese, for example, spoken in Portugal, Brazil, and then there's the Azores Islands or something like that, which is in the middle of the water. There's like nothing around it. French, the French between France and Canada. I mean, are those dialects or just accents? You know what I mean? It's like there's not the official. I think I need a percent. Like I'm someone who's a perfectionist, and so to me, I need a really strict rule. But with languages being so alive, as we mentioned before, it's really difficult. So the conclusion of today is everything is perfect.
Also, nowadays a lot of different colorful variation of English is available. So
Oh yeah,
it's a healthy situation. If one group of people, one people say this is the correct English, only this is the correct English, and such kind of domination doesn't sound like healthy.
yeah.
And people decide, actual user will decide which is what is the proper English or not proper English. In such way, language develops, in my opinion.
Well, also, academic English versus everyday English is a huge difference. I don't speak academically. I don't have a C2. I don't even know if I could pass the C2 exam. It's so particular, it's so specific that I would probably not do well. Maybe someone else would, but that's fine. And so, really, I mean, what's the perfect English? Well, it depends who you're talking to on a regular basis. What's the correct vocabulary? Depends who you're talking to on a regular basis. If it's an international business, or if it's direct to England or to the United States, or wherever, it just truly depends on what you're going to use your English for. I like the fact that there's this super English world. There's one single, but what is it? What's it based off of? What's the pronunciation? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, well, what words and what country uses those more? And I'm going to go for American English because American English is the business international language. Does it mean that American English is better? No. Just because English was invented in England, does that mean it's better? No. And
Nobody
so
speaks language, I guess. As I said, language dialect from another language. That language is also dialect from another language. That's a kind of like species. We just evolve. Language just evolve.
We've all just come from apes, okay? That's just fine. But yeah, well, actually, what I was going to mention before is that in China, they have different types of Chinese. Mandarin is the most important. I know there's also different. Those, to me, that's a pure dialect. Okay, that is a dialect, absolutely.
But I talked with Chinese people yesterday, and he explained, the kind of Chinese has a, Mandarin, is four different pitch. Different pitch difference makes meaning difference. That's Chinese. But if you go to Hong Kong in a Canton area, Cantonese has 10 different pitch difference. It's more complicated. Also, that's the reason why maybe different areas people cannot understand different areas people Chinese. He explained like that, but so
technically that's a different language then. You can't understand.
yeah.
Oh gosh, this is a lot more complicated. I thought we were going to have a definitive answer at the end of this.
I was surprised at it. Yeah, I thought almost like a different language they can communicate with each other, but many words are same, but such pitch difference makes them too difficult to understand from other areas Chinese. He explained like that. But I'm not sure about Chinese.
You know what? I think it's more confusing now. I mean, there's so many buts, ifs, what ifs, situations. I don't think that there's a clear definition anymore. I don't think we the world is mixing in every, culture, and I think it's because of the internet, because of what we see and what we do, and the internet is so important these days that we see things from all over and different things, and I think it's becoming one globalization in general. Everything's becoming globalized, and we're gonna have this huge super language English, which is fine. I'm gonna have to research that a little bit more.
Oh, that's interesting. I like this topic.
Yeah. Well, this is basically, I thought of doing this classes because people say that American English is a dialect of British English, and I'm like, no, because it makes my English seem inferior to the British English, and that's not true. I'm sorry, and I always forget about the Australians, but their English is also important to them. I mean, their country is huge. And they have their own world, they have their news, they have their animals, they have everything. And so, their language also is also important. So we just have to, I think, be diverse enough in order to, I don't know, I don't have a clear answer anymore. I'm so confused. But we'll have to do another conversation like this. Thomas is gonna have to do some classes when I'm gone in September. If the timing isn't gonna work out, that's the problem. I'll be busy. But anyway, we'll see if we get Thomas or James in here at one point and see what they think too. So for now, that's it. Let me just double check and see if I have my schedule up here, and I don't. Oh, what was it? Next Wednesday, we're going to be working on contractions. That's fine. And then on Wednesday, we'll be working on top employee complaints. Okay, so a little bit more business here. So thanks, Ken, for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'd love to continue. There's so many more examples out there, but I think we'll do part two. Okay, see if we can do a little more research next time. So thanks for the conversation, and we'll hopefully see you on Wednesday, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You too. Bye, Ken.